Video game music is very peculiar, in the sense that while the majority of it falls under the radar in terms of its influence or even memorability, the stuff that manages to break the mold not only remains distinct from all other soundtracks, but makes for an incredible conversational piece.
Hey, I'm Cal, and I like video games. Not just old ones, not just new ones, all of them. And if you've been around here for a while, you'll know that I'm crazy about the original Spyro trilogy on the PlayStation. I'm so in love with you. Of course, this grandfather's in the Reignited trilogy, but it doesn't matter how many times I play this one or how good it looks. The originals are always gonna exist, and they're always gonna be amazing.
I played these games at a very crucial point in my life, around the time when my mind first began developing. By that, I mean when I initially began retaining memories and forming rudimentary opinions based around things I liked or disliked.
This trilogy, among a few other titles, was my first foray into the world of video games, and as such, I have a really strong bond with these games. But the amazing thing about this trio is, whether or not you hold it to the same esteem I do, or simply see it as a fun way to kill time, there are many things about it that are just unarguably great. Which brings me to the soundtracks.
Now, if you weren't aware, the soundtracks for Spyro 1 through 3, as well as Enter the Dragonfly, which we're not talking about today, were composed by Stewart Copeland. Astute music fans will recognize Mr. Copeland as co-founder and percussionist of the band The Police, and rightfully so, the guy was a beast. By the mid-80s, however, The Police had officially disbanded, and Copeland went on to begin composing for various movies and television show soundtracks. This brings us to the year 1998, the year he was approached by a little-known Los Angeles-based video game developer, Insomniac Games, who commissioned him to compose the musical score for their upcoming title, Spyro the Dragon. Spoiler alert, it absolutely fucking rocked, and Copeland's trademark sound became a series mainstay up until the goddamn thing keeled over.
The amazing part is, all Copeland needed to craft such iconic music was one of these. A few instrument samples, a primitive version of Cubase, and a tiny dash of something called Spectrasonic's distorted reality. With the exception of a few tracks from Spyro 3, where he received assistance from fellow composer Ryan Beveridge, he was able to compose some of the most influential video game music of all time. But did you know that in accordance with quality, these OSTs also came complete with not only a bit of secrecy, but also a bit of mystery? Back in the day, PlayStation Underground paid a visit to Copeland's studio right as he was smack dab in the middle of composing the soundtrack for the first game. It's here we get to witness firsthand how he went through the process of writing songs for levels, beginning by playing through said levels to get a feel for them, and then crafting the music from there.
They pay me for this.
As a result, each level in the game has a feeling of individuality. While similar in aesthetic and gameplay, they bounce around in theming, going from adventurous to relaxed to dark and even fantastical. And it's all because of the work Copeland did. Don't get me wrong, I'm not devaluing the labor Insomniac themselves put into the game. It would be foolish to remark that things would be just as good without the panoramic open-world gameplay or clever design that seamlessly guides you along. But there's no denying that the music is what makes Spyro not just great, but legendary. And it's all in part to Copeland's method of getting a feel for the levels he needed to compose for. So here's where the mystery comes into play. Why are there unused tracks within the game's files? I know, I just spent like however long we are into the video setting up a question that could easily be answered with an educated guess like maybe the extra tracks are a result of Copeland simply remixing or reworking pre-existing tracks. However, I have a hunch it's a bit more complicated than that and has to do with the different regional releases of Spyro the Dragon. Now, for all of my North American viewers who subsequently played the NTSCU, or Northern Television System Committee of United States Canada release of Spyro, this might come as quite a shock to you. Remember the music that plays during the level High Caves? Yeah, that wasn't the intended song for that level.
And I know, high caves without the slowed down treetops theme, what the hell? Well, the reason for this was long speculated to be because of the refresh rates that the PAL, or Phase Alternating Line, and NTSC-J, or Northern Television System Committee of Japan, configurations displayed at. See, both NTSC and PAL, while similar, are much different in the refresh rates they operate with, NTSC being 60Hz and PAL being 50Hz.
Because of this difference, many games developed for the NTSC format had to be tweaked to compensate for PAL's different refresh rate and vice versa. The most commonly cited and easily recognizable example of this is Sonic the Hedgehog, which, renowned for its speed and intensity on the Sega Genesis, played almost as if it were perpetually underwater on European Mega Drive copies.
Due to this, it was long believed that the difference in musical choice came down to the regions using different formats. However, there's one grueling factor that disproves all of this. NTSC-J displays at 60Hz, and even if it did display at 50Hz, why would that constitute a music change, especially with this track in particular, since it plays at a faster tempo than the track found in the North American release? So there goes that theory out the window, and with it, we're left with a real conundrum. Why do two of the same level in the same game released in different regions not have the same music?
Perhaps it was a decision made further down the line in the game's development cycle. After all, there's a difference of about a month between the North American and European releases, a significant amount of time, though arguably minuscule, especially considering the Japanese version, which, due to the copious amounts of localization and downright botching of the gameplay, released 7 months after on April 1st of 1999. If any of this seems confusing, that's because it is. Honestly, we'll never know why the North American release of Spyro is the only version not to have an original track for the level High Caves. Maybe it's as simple as Copeland having not finished composing the soundtrack until the game's official release in Europe. But either way, it's bugged me for years, and now that I've told you, I hope it bugs you just as much.
Part of me does feel like we're supposed to forget this track as well as any of the hidden ones in Spyro 1 ever existed, since none of them are found in the Reignited trilogy. It's like a conspiracy theory or something. We're just not supposed to remember the definitive version of the High Caves theme or any of the alternate tracks, which I've yet to mention kick in if you hang around in certain levels long enough. Not even the PAL release has this elusive track, and that's the format it first appeared on. But if you think that's all of Spyro's musical mysteries, no. We're just at the tip of the iceberg.
Spyro 2 is considerably lacking in the hidden or changed music department. In fact, the only level I can think of that has different music in the NTSC and PAL releases is Ripto's Arena, and even then the difference isn't a completely new song, but the simple removal of a vocal chorus. That being said, when compared to the first and third game, Ripto's Rage definitely made the most use of samples from Spectrasonic's Distorted Reality, which isn't a point against it. In fact, I think it makes the soundtrack that much more interesting, and the addition of the samples has this effect that gives the music this really cool mechanical futuristic vibe, which is exactly what a lot of Spyro 2 was going for. But here we are at Spyro Year of the Dragon, and I gotta tell ya, from the perspective of music changes by not only region, but also release version, this is where the shit really hits the fan. To begin with, the game was horribly rushed. Spyro the Dragon had a development time of about a year to 2 years, and during this time, Insomniac not only staked their claim gameplay-wise, but also honed their craft. By the time of Spyro 2, they'd pretty much gotten things down pat, and all of their focus went into either improving the few things that had fallen short, or evolving the formula further during a 1-year development cycle. Year of the Dragon wasn't as fortunate. For starters, the development time was considerably shrunken, spanning not even a year but only 10.5 months to meet a much sought-after holiday release. During this time, they implemented a system that could adjust the game's challenge according to however good or bad the player was performing, and pulled a lot of their efforts into crafting larger levels and introducing new playable characters, as well as developing a complicated anti-piracy system to combat crackers.
Now, I think we can all agree that anything under a year for game development is just not enough. I mean, doesn't matter how big a studio is, how impressive their track record may be, or how high expectations are. You simply cannot rush quality work.
This dilemma didn't just apply to the developers either, as Copeland himself was dealing with an arguably even bigger load of work during this period of crunch time. He had to wait for the levels to be finished, or at least in a playable state, so he could get a feel for them and begin composing. I largely suspect this is why Spyro 3's sound is so much different from its predecessors, and why Ryan Beveridge was brought in to assist with the soundtrack, but in reality, no information pertaining to this topic has ever been released, so at the most, it's purely speculation. This brings us to the first North American and European releases of Spyro Year of the Dragon, or if you want to get really technical, the NTSC 1.0 and PAL 1.0 copies. As I said earlier, Spyro 3 is really unique in the sense that its release differences aren't tied to just the regions it came out in, but also the build versions of the game itself. As such, the Black Label releases differ greatly when compared to their greatest or platinum hits counterparts. Gameplay-wise, the automatic difficulty tuner I mentioned earlier was actually removed in the game's second release, as it was actually found to stack the challenge unfairly and, in some instances, prevent the player from being able to attain 100% completion. Then comes the topic of the soundtrack. Anyone who's played the Black Label version of Spyro 3 knows that it feels incomplete. This is largely due to the game's unreasonable 10.5-month development time, which admittedly allowed Insomniac just long enough to develop a presentable build of the game, but not enough time to iron out any of the problems or add much needed bells and whistles.
10 out of the total 33 levels, including a minigame area, are without an original track.
And that's not counting the Sparks levels either. Those are all supposed to have, their own identical track that bonds them all together. Ignore this tangent, but the ones that don't actually have original music have music from other levels standing in their place. Evening Lake and the Sorceress's Lair share Sunrise Springs theme. Lost Fleet is the same as Super Bonus Round, Haunted Tombs is the same as Cloud Spires, Dino Mines is the same as Molten Crater, Crystal Islands is the same as Seashell Shore, the Enchanted Towers skate park theme is the same as Desert Ruins, and each of the speedways share the Harbor Speedway theme. Now, of course, the PAL release sees the Sorceress's Lair accompanied with the music from Spike's Arena, but you get the point. And if I may, what the hell? Why does the Sunrise Spring theme play during the final boss? That's like one of the worst combinations ever conceived. Oh, you're about to go up against the big baddie. Here's some happy music. I've heard that this might have been due to the game's vicious anti-piracy methods, which, if you aren't aware, get pretty relentless as the game goes on. Anyway, the reason the Sunrise Spring theme might play here is actually because getting to the Sorceress in a cracked copy of Spyro 3 sees the game freeze up and then send you back to the start of everything. It's possible that because Sunrise Spring is the first level of the game, it registers this transaction and loads the music preemptively, even in a legitimate 1.0 copy where the anti-piracy hasn't even been triggered. It wasn't until the release of Spyro 3 1.1 in both North America and Europe that these levels were finally given their own unique tracks and everything was finally as it should have been in the first place. Here's the thing though, not all of these levels were missing original songs purely on the basis of Copeland having not yet finished the soundtrack. Both the intended themes for Evening Lake and the final boss can be found within the files on the 1.0 version's disc, so it's highly possible that much like the absent cutscene Spike is Born, their omission in game is purely due to a programming error that queues up the incorrect tracks for their levels, which was obviously fixed in the secondary release.
The weirdest part is, whether or not you're playing on a 1.0 copy with its recycled music or a 1.1 copy with its original music, The tracks all fit. Dino Mines goes perfectly with Molten Crater, as does Crystal Islands with Seashell Shore, so really it just comes down to whatever your preference is. Either way, I hope you've all enjoyed listening to me ramble about something that makes me sound insane, and I highly doubt anyone else cares about. Alright, maybe one or two of you share the same sentiment. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you all next time. We'll do a giant mukbang.